"You filthy, worthless black bitch. I'll make you bleed for this. I swear on my son's life." Genevieve Monroe's voice, a razor blade wrapped in silk, sliced through the opulent silence of the upstairs corridor. Just a month ago, Ava Thompson, a 29-year-old black woman, had felt a surge of desperate hope accepting a full-time housekeeping position with the billionaire Monroe family. The pay was a lifeline, the only thing standing between her mother and a mountain of crushing medical debt. The work was soul-crushing, a daily exercise in becoming invisible in a world of blinding whiteness, but she'd mastered the art of keeping her head down. Until today. Have you ever been in a situation where doing the right thing could cost you everything, simply because of who you are? If you've ever felt the weight of prejudice, give this video a like and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. You might just find a kindred spirit in your own city. The shriek that followed was sharp enough to shatter the crystal chandeliers. Ava froze mid-polish, the silver tray in her hands trembling, delicate porcelain cups clattering like chattering teeth. In her short time in the sprawling Boston estate, she had learned the rhythm of the house, the hushed whispers of the staff, the distant murmur of Julian Monroe's conference calls, the tinkling laughter of his 1-year-old son, Leo. This sound was a violation. It was urgent, raw, and utterly terrifying. She abandoned the tray on a mahogany console table and ran, her heart hammering against her ribs. The nursery door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness in the brightly lit hallway. Inside, the scene was a portrait of chaos. Leo lay crumpled on the plush Persian rug beside his crib, his cherubic cheeks blotched and tear-stained. A thin ribbon of blood traced a terrifying path along his tiny hairline. Genevieve, draped in a peacock blue silk robe, stood swaying over him, her eyes wide, glassy, and unfocused. On the floor, glinting under the soft nursery light, lay a syringe. On the nightstand, a mirrored tray held a dusting of fine white powder. "Don't you touch him!" Genevieve lunged, her finger a trembling accusation pointed at Ava. "He's my son, do you hear me? My son!" "He's bleeding." Ava's voice was a tight, strangled whisper. "He needs a doctor." Just then, Mrs. Davies, the head housekeeper, appeared in the doorway. She was a woman carved from ice, always impeccably neat, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Mind your place, Miss Thompson," she said, her voice colder than the Boston winter. "Family matters are not your concern. You meddle, you make trouble for yourself." Leo whimpered again, a small, broken sound that shattered the last of Ava's carefully constructed obedience. The unspoken rule, Mrs. Davies had drilled into her from day one. See nothing, say nothing, be nothing, crumbled to dust in her chest. She had heard variations of that rule her whole life, the quiet command for a black woman to remain unseen and unheard. Not today. She crossed the room in 3 long strides, scooped the small, warm weight of the boy into her arms, and pulled out her phone. "What do you think you're doing?" Genevieve barked, her voice a ragged mess of panic and rage. "Calling 911, Ava said, her fingers flying across the screen. 1-year-old head injury. Mother possibly impaired. Monroe residence, Westwood Heights." "You filthy liar!" Genevieve shrieked, her voice climbing to a hysterical pitch. "She's hurting him, Mrs. Davies! She's doing this to make me look unfit!" "I warned you," Mrs. Davies said, her voice a low, cutting threat. "Put the child down and wait for Mr. Monroe." The air was thick with the cloying scent of Genevieve's expensive perfume, laced with something acrid and chemical. "You people," Genevieve hissed, her face contorting with a venom that went deeper than anger. It was steeped in generations of prejudice. "You people are all the same, always scheming. My husband will never believe you. You're nothing here." "I heard him cry," Ava said, holding Leo closer, his small body trembling against hers. That's all that matters." The slap came out of nowhere. Genevieve's hand, adorned with a heavy diamond ring, whipped across Ava's face. The blow was so stunningly hard that Ava staggered backward, her head cracking against the wooden bars of the crib. Pain, white-hot and searing, exploded across her cheek. She nearly lost her grip on Leo. "Give him to me!" Mrs. Davies barked, grabbing at Ava's arm, her long nails digging into the flesh. "Back off!" Ava gasped, shielding the boy with her body. Genevieve's face twisted with a new, dawning hatred. "You think I don't see your game? Trying to worm your way into my husband's life, get his money. That's what your kind does. Plot and plan for a payout." She spat the words, her voice thick with contempt. "Filthy, dirty, black." "That's not true." Ava's voice shook, a mix of pain and fury. "I only—" Her protest was cut off as Mrs. Davies shoved her hard in the shoulder, knocking her off balance. Genevieve struck again, this time with the back of her hand, the ring catching Ava's jaw. The two women crowded her, a terrifying barrage of insults and blows. Mrs. Davies's nails raked her skin. Genevieve's palm cracked against her face again and again. "You don't belong in this house!" Genevieve snarled, her face inches from Ava's. "You'll never be anything but the help." The wail of distant sirens cut through the chaos. Paramedics burst in moments later, their calm professionalism a stark contrast to the room's madness. One medic immediately scooped Leo from Ava's arms, his partner checking the boy's pupils. Another took one look at Genevieve, his eyes flicking to the tray on the nightstand, before his expression became a carefully blank mask. Mrs. Davies stepped forward, her composure miraculously restored. "No police are necessary. Mrs. Monroe is just tired." "Head injury on a 1-year-old and a possibly impaired adult? We're involved," the medic said flatly. Leo was gently loaded onto a pediatric stretcher. Ava reached out and brushed his soft hair back from his forehead. "You're okay," she whispered. He clutched her finger with surprising strength until the medic eased his hand away. Genevieve was wheeled out next, her glare a silent, burning promise of revenge. On the grand marble landing, Mrs. Davies leaned in close to Ava, her voice a venomous whisper. "You have made a terrible, terrible mistake, Miss Thompson. Pack your things. You're finished." By the time the flashing red and blue lights faded into the night, Ava's cheek throbbed violently and her ribs ached from the shoves, but the steel that had been forged in her spine felt harder than ever. Moments later, a black sedan with tinted windows rolled silently up the driveway. Julian Monroe climbed out, every inch the self-made billionaire, tall, impeccably tailored, with a face that looked as though it were carved from granite. "Where is my son?" he demanded, his voice clipped and dangerous. "St. Jude's Medical Center," Ava said, her voice hoarse. He hit his head. "How?" The single word was laced with menace. She told him everything. Leo on the floor, the blood, the syringe, Genevieve's state. She left out the blooming bruises on her own body, knowing instinctively he wouldn't care. Julian's eyes went cold as Arctic ice. "You're accusing my wife of negligence." "I'm telling you what I saw." He stepped closer, towering over her, his presence suffocating. "You've been here a month. You don't know my wife. And I will not have a troublemaker stirring up lies in my house. You people love to play the victim." The way he said, "you people," left no doubt he meant more than just the staff. "That's not enough!" His voice was a whip crack. "Pack your things, or I will make sure no one in this city or this state ever hires you again." That night, Ava sat on the narrow bed in her small, bare apartment, her body a symphony of aches. The throbbing in her cheek was a constant reminder of Genevieve's hatred, but the ache in her heart was for Leo. Then, one thought cut through the pain, a tiny flicker of hope. the small black dome in the nursery ceiling. The camera. Driven by a desperate energy, she found a way back onto the estate grounds, slipping through a gap in the rear hedge she'd noticed weeks ago. She scaled a trellis to the nursery balcony, her sore muscles screaming in protest. Inside, she reached for the camera, her fingers fumbling with the tiny slot, only to find it empty. The SD card was gone. She turned slowly, a cold dread washing over her. Mrs. Davies stood in the doorway, a small plastic case held delicately in her hand. "Mrs. Monroe asked me to take this," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "For privacy." Genevieve's voice floated in from the hall, bright and mocking. She stepped into the room, a silk scarf artfully tied at her throat. "You think a little piece of plastic will save you? My husband will never believe a lying black maid over his own wife?" "I'll tell the court what I saw," Ava said, her voice surprisingly steady. Genevieve laughed, a sound devoid of all warmth. "Court? Darling, you'd be bankrupt before the first hearing. Women like you don't win against people like us." She shoved Ava hard in the chest. Mrs. Davies followed with another sharp push. Ava stumbled back, hitting the edge of the crib and sinking to her knees, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Get out of my sight," Genevieve snapped, turning away with a dismissive flick of her wrist. The next day, bruised but not broken, Ava found her way to St. Jude's. She needed answers. In the pediatric wing, a nurse with kind eyes recognized her immediately. "You were the one holding Leo yesterday," she said, her voice low. "We all saw the state his mother was in, and what was on that nightstand. We'd testify to it." By afternoon, those hushed testimonies, officially documented, reached Julian Monroe. Ava watched from a distance as he read the report provided by the hospital's legal team. The change in his face was slow, a glacier of denial cracking under the undeniable heat of the truth. Without a single word to Ava, he stormed back to his car and sped toward the estate. Minutes later, Genevieve's screams echoed down the marble hallways, audible even from the driveway where Ava waited. "You're throwing me out! For her!" Julian's voice was a blade of cold steel. "Pack your things, Genevieve. The driver will take you to the apartment downtown. You won't see Leo until I say so." Genevieve whirled, her eyes blazing with impotent fury, and spotted Ava standing in the grand entryway. The sight of her ignited a fresh inferno of rage. She stormed forward, her face a mask of pure hatred. "Dirty black woman!" she shrieked, the words echoing with centuries of venom. "I swear you'll pay for every single drop of his blood." She spat on the marble floor near Ava's feet. "You low-scheming rat! That's all your kind is. Digging for scraps, sniffing around for rich men's pockets. You think this makes you the hero? You will always be dirt under my shoes." Ava met her glare, her own eyes clear and unwavering. "Maybe," she said, her voice even and calm, "but I'm the dirt that saved your son's life." Genevieve's gasp was pure, unadulterated fury. She shoved past Mrs. Davies, muttering a final string of curses as the heavy front door slammed shut behind her, rattling the very foundations of the house. Ava exhaled slowly, the breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She had survived the lies, the blows, and the names. She had the truth. And now she had witnesses to help her stand on it. The deceptive calm that followed Genevieve's departure was more unsettling than the storm itself. The Monroe estate hummed with a quiet tension, a wire pulled taut and vibrating with unspoken questions. Mrs. Davies moved through the halls like a ghost, her face a mask of cold professionalism, but the smirk that played on her lips whenever she passed Ava was a silent promise of future trouble. "Careful with your chores today," she murmured once, just loud enough for Ava to hear. "You wouldn't want to slip and have another accident." Ava ignored her, focusing on the new, fragile alliance she had formed. The nurses at St. Jude's were her lifeline, but she needed something undeniable, something that money and influence couldn't bury. She knew Julian Monroe. His belief was conditional, his trust a flickering candle in the wind. If she wanted to secure her position, and more importantly, ensure Leo's safety, she needed the one thing Genevieve and Mrs. Davies had stolen: the video footage. She doubted they had destroyed it. People like the Monroes didn't destroy leverage. They hoarded it, weaponized it. Her chance came when a black SUV from a high-end security firm parked out front. Ava watched through the library windows as a technician in a gray suit spoke with Julian, his laptop displaying security schematics of the estate. Her pulse leaped. She waited until the technician was packing up his cables in the hall. "Excuse me," she said, forcing a calm she didn't feel into her voice. "You work on the security cameras?" He hesitated, glancing toward the study where Julian was on the phone. "Maintenance call. Mrs. Monroe requested a system reset before she left." "A reset?" Ava said, keeping her expression neutral. "Does that mean the old footage is gone?" "Not necessarily," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Backups are stored on a secure cloud server. The client can request a data pull at any time." Hope flared hot in her chest. "And who can request it?" "Mr. or Mrs. Monroe," he said, packing his last cable, "or anyone with their written consent." That night, the atmosphere at dinner was frosty. Julian ate in silence, his jaw tight. After the dishes were cleared, he called her into the study. "The nurses' statements corroborate your version of events," he said, not looking up from his paperwork. "That is why Genevieve is gone." Ava waited. "That doesn't mean I trust you," he continued, his eyes finally lifting to meet hers. They were cold and assessing. "You stepped into a family matter, but for Leo's sake, I am letting this go." "Letting it go," Ava repeated, a spark of indignation flaring. "Your son could have died." His jaw snapped shut. "Do not mistake my restraint for gratitude, Miss Thompson. You are here to do a job. Do it, and stay out of my way." She wasn't there for his gratitude. She was there for the truth. Ava knew she needed an ally inside the house. She found one in Sam, the youngest footman, too new to be fully indoctrinated into the Monroes' toxic culture of loyalty. She cornered him in the pantry one evening. "You handle tech errands for Mr. Monroe sometimes, right?" she asked, her voice low. He nodded cautiously. "There's a file," she said. "A video from the nursery. It proves what really happened. If I can get a copy, they can't twist this story anymore. You'd be helping Leo." Sam hesitated, but something in her desperate sincerity must have resonated. "I'll see what I can do," he whispered. The next afternoon, in the quiet back hallway, he slipped a small flash drive into her hand. "It's from the last data pull the vendor did before the system reset," he mumbled, refusing to meet her eye. "I don't know what's on it." Her hands shook as she took it. "Thank you, Sam." That night, in the dim light of her small room, she plugged the drive into her old, sputtering laptop. The file was there, time-stamped, clear, and brutal. It showed Leo's fall from the crib as Genevieve stumbled past, high and oblivious. It showed Genevieve's delayed, panicked reaction. And then it showed Ava running in, scooping up the boy, dialing for help. It captured every word, every shove, every vicious slap, all recorded in unblinking digital memory. She sat back, a sound caught in her throat somewhere between a sob and a laugh of triumph. This was it. This was the truth, undeniable and raw. If you were in Ava's shoes, would you go to the police or confront Julian directly? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're hooked on this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because the storm is just getting started. The next morning, she didn't go to the police. She went to Julian. She didn't speak. She simply placed the laptop on his desk and pressed play. He watched in absolute silence, the color draining from his face, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of his desk. When the video ended, a profound, chilling stillness filled the room. He closed the laptop slowly. "This stays between us," he said finally, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name. "For Leo's sake, Genevieve will never set foot in this house again. And you—" He paused, his eyes searching her face, seeing her not as the help, not as a problem, but as the woman who had saved his child. "You may stay, but do not ever cross me." Ava met his gaze, her own resolve like iron. "I didn't cross you, Mr. Monroe," she said softly. "I saved your son." He didn't answer, but for the first time since she had set foot in his cold, magnificent house, he didn't look at her like she was dirt under his shoes. The fight wasn't over. She knew people like Genevieve didn't just disappear. Her hatred wouldn't die quietly. But for now, Ava had what she needed. Truth. Witnesses. And the unshakable knowledge that survival wasn't about keeping your head down. Sometimes it was about standing tall, even when the very ground beneath you was trembling. The weeks that followed were a fragile truce. Julian threw himself into his work, his interactions with Ava becoming polite, distant, but underscored with a new, grudging respect. But Genevieve wasn't silent for long. The first assault came through whispers. Footmen would report hearing rumors in the city that the Black Maid was a manipulative gold digger, that she had a history of targeting wealthy families. Then came the lawyers. A formal complaint was filed against Ava, alleging harassment and emotional manipulation of a minor. It was a classic tactic of the rich. Bury your opponent in legal fees until they suffocated. Ava felt a familiar knot of dread, but it was different this time. She wasn't alone. She called Nurse Sarah, who rallied the other hospital staff. She met with Sam, who promised to keep his ear to the ground. And she had the video, a copy of which she had given to Sarah for safekeeping. The true escalation came on a cold Thursday evening. Julian was hosting a high-profile charity gala at the estate. Ava was working the event, moving silently through the glittering crowds with trays of champagne. Suddenly, a voice, dripping with malice, cut through the din. "Well, look at you, playing the part of the loyal servant so beautifully." It was Genevieve. She had crashed the party, looking stunning in an emerald green gown, her eyes burning with a cold fire. She cornered Ava near the terrace doors. "You think you're safe here?" she hissed, her voice low enough that no one else could hear. "You're a temporary amusement. He'll get tired of you, and when he does, I'll be there to pick up the pieces. And you'll be back on the street where you belong." "Leave," Ava said, her voice steady. "Or what? You'll cry to Julian?" Genevieve laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Let me tell you something about men like my husband. They value pedigree. They value power. They don't value the help, especially not the black help." She reached out and knocked the tray from Ava's hands. Champagne flutes shattered on the marble floor, drawing the attention of nearby guests. "Clumsy girl," Genevieve said loudly, a mask of fake sympathy on her face. "You really should be more careful." Should, but she had miscalculated. Julian had seen the whole exchange. He strode over, his face a thundercloud. "Genevieve," he said, his voice dangerously low, "you're trespassing. Security will see you out." Her face flushed with humiliation and rage. As two guards escorted her away, she shot a final venomous look at Ava. "This isn't over. I will burn your entire world to the ground." The incident solidified Julian's position. The next morning, he called Ava into his study. "Her lawyers are trying to paint you as unstable. We need to fight back, not with rumors, but with facts." He authorized his own legal team to represent Ava, to countersue for defamation and assault. He also had his security team retrieve every piece of digital evidence from the cloud server, not just from the nursery, but from every camera in the house on the day of the incident. The evidence they found was damning. Hallway cameras caught Mrs. Davies coaching Genevieve on what to say before the paramedics arrived. Another camera captured Mrs. Davies removing the SD card. It was a conspiracy, cold and calculated. When presented with the evidence, Mrs. Davies was fired on the spot, her icy composure finally cracking as she was escorted from the property. The final confrontation took place not in the mansion, but in the sterile wood-paneled conference room of a law firm. Ava sat beside Julian, facing Genevieve and her legal team across a long, polished table. Genevieve tried to maintain her air of untouchable arrogance, but as Julian's lawyer laid out the evidence, piece by irrefutable piece, the nurse's testimonies, the paramedic reports, the hallway footage, and finally, the nursery video, her facade began to crumble. When the video played on the large screen, showing the moment Genevieve slapped Ava, a black woman holding a bleeding white child, a hush fell over the room. The racial dynamics were impossible to ignore. Genevieve stared at the screen, her own actions laid bare, and for the first time, she looked small, defeated. Her lawyer leaned over and whispered frantically in her ear. A deal was struck. All lawsuits would be dropped. Genevieve would agree to supervised visitation with Leo, contingent on her completing a mandatory rehabilitation program. She would issue a formal, public apology to Ava Thompson, and she would never set foot on the Monroe estate again. As they left the building, stepping out into the bright Boston sunlight, Ava felt a profound sense of release. The war was over. Julian stopped on the sidewalk and turned to her. "I was wrong," he said, the words seeming to cost him a great deal. "About you, about everything. You are not just the help, Ava. You are the strongest person I have ever met." That evening, Ava sat with Leo on the veranda, reading him a story as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The grand estate no longer felt like a prison, but a sanctuary she had fought for and won. Her mother's medical bills were paid off, thanks to a generous bonus from a grateful Julian. She had her job, her dignity, and the love of a little boy who saw her as his hero. Her journey is a powerful testament to a crucial truth. Your worth is not defined by your job title, the color of your skin, or the venomous words of those who see you as less. It is defined by your courage, your integrity, and your unwavering commitment to doing what is right. Ava faced not just the cruelty of a single family, but the weight of a systemic prejudice that tried to silence her. Her victory was not just for herself, but for every person who has ever been told they were nothing. It reminds us that even when you feel like dirt under someone's shoe, you can be the very foundation on which justice, truth, and a better world are built. What do you think is the most important lesson from Ava's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story of resilience against all odds moved you, please give it a like and subscribe for more tales of courage that will inspire you. Thank you for watching.